Well guys, today we are going to be replacing the supercharger on the Mini because it has developed what many have affectionately referred to as the death rattle. So I will play a video clip of what the sound is coming from my car, checked a few different other things, and I've narrowed it down to what I think is going to be the bearing on the front of the supercharger closest to the pulley is what's going bad. So luckily it's not the water pump side, so technically I could drive around on it for a while, and I have been driving around on it for about 1,000 miles. Part of it because I didn't even know it was happening. It wasn't loud enough for me to hear it inside the car even with the radio off. I just happened to notice it one day when I rolled my window down to talk to someone in a parking lot. So I'll show you the sound, I'll show you kind of how I found it and things that you can do to identify this on your car. And then what we're going to do is move into swapping out the supercharger. I'm not going to give you exact DIY details on how to do all this because there are a bunch of great videos out there on how to do this, and I am not an expert, so I don't necessarily want to tell you the wrong thing. This is kind of me learning along with you and hopefully providing some entertainment. So we'll go over what's in these two boxes. So in this box right here, we have our actual supercharger. It is completely rebuilt. Detroit Tuned is the one who did it. They do it for about $850 once you send back your core. I got this in the mail yesterday. It came in like 2 or 3 days. We are in the middle of coronavirus right now and it still got here super fast, so I appreciate that. And then same thing, 2 days for the ECS Tuning support box. So they hooked me up with that, and that's going to be some extra parts that aren't necessary to do this job, but it's a good idea while you're in there, go ahead and replace a few things. We're going to go through what's in that box. So here we have our rebuilt supercharger from Detroit Tuned. They are on, I believe, their 3rd iteration of different designs and upgrades they do. So different bearings and things like that. They do say the gearing is a little bit louder now, which honestly I like the supercharger whine, so having it be a little bit louder will actually be a nice addition, but apparently it's stronger. So they've really refined how they do this. It was obviously packaged extremely well. Everything looks nice and clean. And you can see they've got little marks here on each of the bolts letting you know that they tightened it down. So I'm seeing a lot of signs of a very professional build. And they've been doing this for a long time, so I have no issues trusting them. They have great instructions on here. Everything is filled up already, so you shouldn't have to do anything, just install it on your car. They also sent a little care package, so I've got some stickers and different things, so that's always nice. Middle of coronavirus, so some Clorox wipes are appreciated. And now we'll get over to our ECS Tuning box and see what's going on with this. So this is all labeled as ECS Tuning's Supercharger Oil Replacement Kit. So it comes with all of the gaskets and things that you would touch removing the supercharger, and of course extra supercharger oil. I don't need that, but the nice thing is this was all one part number to just go ahead and order it. Here is a detailed breakdown. And then it also comes with a water pump. Your water pump, if you don't know, is driven off the back of the supercharger, so right here. So this slots in here, which is why I was concerned that if the supercharger went bad and this stopped spinning, it would stop spinning the water pump, car would overheat, and it would be dead. So it comes with all the things I need to replace this. The supercharger oil I'll just put up and I can use for later. So we've got all of this taken care of. So we'll go over to the car and I'll show you the noise, and then we can start swapping everything out. One other thing I wanted to mention is this does have a 2-year unlimited mile warranty. So it's non-transferable, but if you're going to keep the car, you've got 2 years of carefree driving. You can drive around, and if anything happens, it will get replaced for free. So that's nice. So we have the Mini tucked up here in the shade. We're going to have to put it in what's called front-end service mode, where you're going to take off the bumper, you're going to take off the bumper cover, obviously, and you're going to move the radiator and the condenser out of the way. We're going to also be installing an aluminum radiator at the same time, so you probably already saw that video. It came out before this one. If you haven't, you can check it out. If you're doing this service, or if you're just doing an oil change on the supercharger, it is a really good time to go ahead and upgrade your radiator. Or there is a gasket that we're going to change. I've got a slight oil leak on the front of the engine. It's a good time to change that. So there's a lot of stuff you can access while you're here in front-end service mode, and you might as well kill 2 birds with 1 stone, the same way we are with the water pump and all the different gaskets and things like that. Unfortunately, I do not have enough space on my memory card to do a time-lapse of this whole scenario, so I'm going to check in with you periodically as we make our way through the front-end service mode. But as promised, before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and start the car up and let it run a little bit so you can hear the sound and show you how I found the sound It kind of sounds like a bag of rocks has been put into a blender. It's just very crunchy and mechanical sounding. It's not a very pleasant sound. The way you're going to identify specifically where the sound is coming from is actually very simple with a screwdriver. What you're going to do is place the tip of the screwdriver in various different places on the engine, and then place your ear on the end of the screwdriver. So it'll be a very distinct difference between placing it up here on the intake, or on the supercharger, or down here closer to the pulleys. You can move it around, you can move it to different places on the engine, and as you get closer to the sound, it obviously will get louder. The loudest point for me was when I would tuck it down here right on the snout of a supercharger, which tells me that that's the bearing that's going bad. I tried that on the other side of the engine, I tried it in various places on the back of the engine, and the sound just got quieter and quieter as I moved away from that area. So I don't think it's an issue with the tensioner. Now I am going to go ahead and replace the tensioner so that I don't have any issues with chain slap in the future, but that is one noise that you're trying to eliminate. Is it a supercharger? Is it the timing chain? What could it be? So we'll go ahead and start it and see what it sounds like. As you can probably tell, it is a horrible noise. It's just very mechanical and grindy, and it's not a good noise. So let's get rid of this noise, and we'll get that new supercharger on so we can enjoy the car again. So we now have the car in front-end service mode. If you want to know how to do that, you can go back and watch my video on how I installed the radiator. So we've got the radiator out of the way, the fans, condenser, all of that. I also went ahead and took the intercooler off. You have full access to the front of the engine, and I'm now just going to start working through getting the supercharger off. So there's a great video, I believe it's on Mod Mini's channel. He does a lot of great DIYs on how to do all these services. This would be a good time if you weren't replacing the supercharger, at least replace the supercharger oil. You could siphon it out with a syringe and then put it back in. It's not as good as taking it off the motor. If you came this far, just go ahead and take it off the motor. But then again, there still is a lot of work to be done, and it was a lot of work to get here. So this is by no means a small job, but it's all easy stuff. It's just there's a lot of little things to do. Well guys, as you can tell, it is now dark out. I did take a break for dinner for about an hour, hour and a half, so it wasn't all work the whole time. Really, when I left off, it really wasn't a whole lot of work. The hardest part was this black pipe that connects directly to the supercharger from the throttle body. It's got a pipe here so that when you let off the throttle, the boost can go through and you don't have any sort of issues when the throttle body slams shut. It's kind of like a blow-off valve for a turbocharger. It's called a bypass valve. But getting that hose off, because this has to go this way to come off the supercharger, but you have to also pull down to get this little rubber off between the two barbs here. So it was a little bit of a pain, but for the most part, nothing difficult, nothing even remotely like when I had to install headers on the 350Z or something like that, where it was really frustrating and I just could not get it to work, or I was fighting against the space. You have a ton of space up here, and you can really get to anything if you move some things around. So be prepared to remove a lot of extra stuff, but in the end, it was actually pretty easy. So let's go take a look at my old supercharger, and we can look at what was wrong with it. So here we have the supercharger that came off my car. Other than the obvious fact that it is extremely dirty, I have found the problem. If I hold this pulley still, I can wiggle the water pump pulley. You hear that? Those are the teeth on the gears that are so spread apart and worn that they can rattle. So instead of being tightly together, they have a lot of space to move. It's a good amount of movement, which, I mean, that is the noise. This is rattling at one speed, so spinning like normal, and this is allowed to move back and forth. So that is our problem. The only thing you have to do to this, other than, you know, wipe off this extra oil, you're going to have to remove the little red plug that goes right here. So it looks like this. Mine is all covered in stuff. I don't know if it's because they can't buy these, but this is the only thing they don't supply you. So it's right here where that breather tube goes. You're just going to pop that out, and you can put it back in your new one. But they do provide everything to bag this up, so what you're going to do is just wrap it in a bag, put it in the box, and ship it back to them. They give you a little return package slip that you can put in there so they know whose it belongs to, and you get your $500 back for core, and in the end you end up spending $850 on this. To get the kit from ECS Tuning, I think it's around $230. So in the end, expect to spend a little bit over $1,000 for this. By the time you're done, I would say $1,100 would be a good budget number. And that is to have a brand new supercharger, essentially, new water pump, all the new little seals and everything, and it'll give you a chance to do a lot of work on the front of your engine. So really, I think it's $1,100 well spent, even though these cars are only down in the $3,000 to $6,000 range, depending on year and how good a shape it's in. Considering I expect this new supercharger to last at least 200,000 miles, I would say it's a pretty good investment. The rest of the engine's probably not going to last that long, so we'll come to that when we get to it. But this is just one of those things that you have to do to these engines to keep them going. You can't run it without a supercharger. You can't run it without a water pump. So if you want an R53 Mini, this is a bridge you will eventually have to cross. And luckily, Detroit Tune offers you an option that's relatively budget friendly, considering the car originally cost, I think, somewhere around $30,000, even if it was in the mid-20s. This is only a small fraction of the price to get what is essentially a brand new supercharger. So I'm going to go ahead and get that other one installed, and I will show it to you guys once it's in. I'm going to spend a lot of time cleaning up everything. I'm going to go ahead and clean this piece off before I put it back on the new supercharger. I'm just going to make everything look nice and clean and see if I can find any oil leaks or things like that to fix while I'm in there. But I will update you guys once I get that done. Well, we have the old supercharger boxed up and ready to go back to Detroit Tune so they can rebuild it for someone else. And we have our new supercharger with the hat put on. We've got the water pump installed already. So I wanted to get as much done off the engine as I possibly could. Of course, we had all those goodies from ECS Tuning. So water pump came with this. The little outlet that attaches to the side of the engine is already bolted onto the block. We've got this hose right here is already installed on the engine, and we'll slide that on as we install it. And then, of course, the gasket down here for the supercharger bolts to the intake tube. So we've got everything set up and ready to go. All I have to do is put this back on the engine and just reverse of everything I did before. I did try to clean some of this stuff up. Obviously, it's not as clean as what Detroit Tune did, but I'm sure they have a sandblasting cabinet and an industrial washer and all that. This was, close enough that it at least doesn't look awful. I also did a bunch of things on the engine, so things like changing the seal for the crank position sensor right there. The ECS Tuning kit came with a new seal for the dipstick tube, a bunch of other small things. You can see that new inlet right here for where the water pump goes into the block, and then I've already got the new seal going into the intake tube right here. So we've got everything set up ready to go. We just have to slot everything back on. Really, overall, this wasn't that bad, so we'll see how bad the install is compared to taking the old one out. Well, as you can see, we have the supercharger back on the car, and I'm going to be honest, this was way easier than I thought it was going to be. It was obviously a lot of work, and it has taken me a lot of time to do it. I would say total about 8 hours, going nice and slow. So really, if you were in a hurry and you knew what you were doing and you're a little bit more familiar with these cars, you could probably get this in and out in 6 hours. But yeah, it is really not a difficult job. If you're someone who's a little on the edge on whether or not you want to do it, I would definitely go ahead and do it. Save yourself some money. Start on Friday night. You'll definitely be done before you have to go back to work on Monday. Just be really meticulous, stay organized. One thing I did to kind of break things up is as I moved to a different part of a car, I started putting bolts in a different cup. So I had different cups for supercharger and water pump, and when I was doing intake stuff and top end bumpers and all that different stuff. So break it up a little bit, make it easy on yourself. But yeah, so everything is buttoned up. I've double and triple checked everything just to make sure everything is tightened down, everything is connected the way it's supposed to be, and I'm going to go ahead and throw our new radiator in. If you watched the radiator video, you already noticed that, and if you have not watched that video, go back and check that one out. But I'm extremely impressed with Detroit Tuning. The thing looks great, it feels great. They shipped it here extremely quickly. I'd like to thank ECS Tuning for helping me out with all the extra bits, seals, and water pump and things that you can go ahead and replace while you're in here doing this job. But I would say this is definitely a worthwhile investment in both money and in time. For about $1,100, you have basically what is a brand new front end on the car. So you should be ready to go for thousands and thousands of miles of carefree driving. Of course, if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop those in the comments below. If you want a little bit more detail versus just entertainment, you can head on over to Mod Mini's page and he will show you exactly step by step every bolt and nut and all that you need to do. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button, drop some comments down below, and I will see you guys next week.